Welcome to When Africa Speaks, Legendary Corner. Thank you for joining this great movement. Whether you are watching from Lagos or London, from Accra or Atlanta, from Nairobi or New York, this message is for you. Because no matter where you live, no matter what passport you carry, if Africa flows in your blood, this story is yours. We are starting something special here. This is not just entertainment. This is not just history. This is an awakening. For too long, we have heard other people tell our story. They told us we were backward. They told us we had no history. They told us we needed saving. But today, we reclaim our narrative. We remember our heroes. We honor our dreamers. And we wake up the sleeping giant within us. Our topic for today is the dream of a continent. We will ask important questions. Why is Africa rich in resources but poor in development? What happened to the dreams our founding fathers had for us? And most importantly, what can we do about it? A quick note before we start. This series is about education, not anger. About remembering, not resenting. About building, not blaming. We will speak truth, but we speak it with dignity. We will discuss history, but we focus on the future. Our goal is simple: to awaken the giant within every African, so we can build the Africa our ancestors dreamed of. To answer our questions today, we will meet 4 legendary leaders. KWAME Nkrumah from Ghana, the visionary who said Africa must unite or perish. PATRICE Lumumba from Congo, the brave voice who refused to bow to oppression. JULIUS Nyerere from Tanzania, the humble teacher who believed education is freedom. And Nnamdi Azikiwe from Nigeria, the great Zik who used words to liberate a nation. These men dared to dream when dreaming was dangerous. They fought when fighting seemed impossible. They believed in Africa when the world said Africa was nothing. Today, we honor them. We learn from them. And we ask ourselves, are we worthy of their sacrifice? So settle in. Open your heart. Open your mind. This is day 1, the dream of a continent. Let us begin. Before we talk about Africa's challenges, let us remember Africa's greatness. Africa is the birthplace of humanity. What does this mean? It means that scientists have proven, through bones, DNA, and archaeological evidence, that the very first human beings lived right here in East Africa. Over 200,000 years ago, in places like Tanzania, Kenya, and Ethiopia, our oldest ancestors walked this earth. These were not just Africans. These were the great-great-great-grandparents of every human being alive today. Scientists found the oldest human fossils, human bones, in a place called Olduvai Gorge in Tanzania. They also found them in Ethiopia and Kenya. These discoveries proved something amazing. All humans, no matter what they look like or where they live, came from Africa. From Africa, humans began to travel and spread across the world. Some walked north into Europe. Some traveled east into Asia. Some eventually crossed into the Americas. Over thousands and thousands of years, people adapted to different climates. Their skin changed colors to match the sun in their new homes. Their features changed slightly, but their origin? Africa. That European you see, African ancestor. That Asian you see, African ancestor. That American you see, African ancestor. We are the original people. We are the mother continent. This is not a story. This is not a myth. This is scientific fact accepted by researchers all over the world. So when anyone tells you Africa has no history, when anyone calls us uncivilized or primitive, remember this truth. Civilization started with us. Humanity started with us. We were here first. This is not arrogance. This is simply our story. Now let me tell you about a city that changed everything. Timbuktu. Today, when people say Timbuktu, they mean somewhere far away and forgotten. But 600 years ago, Timbuktu was one of the greatest cities on earth. It was the Harvard of Africa. It was the Oxford of the desert. Located in present-day Mali, West Africa, Timbuktu was a center of gold, books, and knowledge. Let me take you back to the 14th and 15th centuries. This was a time historians call the Middle Ages or medieval period. In Europe during this time, most cities were struggling. Streets were dirty and disease spread easily. Most people, even nobles, could not read or write. Very few books existed because printing was not yet common. This period is often called Europe's Dark Ages. But in Timbuktu, we were building universities. The most famous was called Sankore Madrasa, the University of Sankore. This university had over 25,000 students at its peak. Students came from all over Africa, and even from the Arab world and beyond, to study there. What did they study? Mathematics and geometry, astronomy and the stars, medicine and surgery, law and justice, philosophy and logic, literature and poetry, history and languages. Timbuktu had more than 700,000 manuscripts, handwritten books on every subject you can imagine. These books were so valuable that families would give them as wedding gifts. Owning a large library meant you were truly wealthy, not just in money, but in knowledge. Let me give you examples of how advanced we were. African scholars in Timbuktu were performing successful eye surgeries and treating complicated diseases, while European doctors were still using leeches and outdated methods. African astronomers in Timbuktu were accurately calculating the movements of stars and planets, while many Europeans still debated whether the Earth was flat or round. African mathematicians were solving complex equations that wouldn't be discovered in Europe for another 100 years. The city was so rich in gold that when Mansa Musa, the emperor of Mali, traveled to Mecca in 1324, he gave away so much gold that it crashed the economy of Egypt for years. Timbuktu was proof that Africa was intellectually, economically, and culturally ahead of most of the world. So when anyone tells you Africa has no history, when anyone tells you we contributed nothing to human knowledge, tell them about Timbuktu. Tell them that while Europe was struggling through its dark ages, Africa was already enlightened. The manuscripts still exist today, thousands of them preserved by families for generations. The buildings still stand. The history is real. And now, we remember. But then, history took a difficult turn. To understand why our founding fathers fought so hard, we must understand the challenges they faced. In November 1884, representatives from powerful European nations met in Berlin, Germany. Around the table sat diplomats from Britain, France, Germany, Belgium, Portugal, Spain, and Italy. They gathered to discuss the future of Africa. But here's what's shocking. Not a single African was invited to this meeting. No African king, no African queen, no African chief, no African representative. For months, these European leaders looked at maps of Africa and made decisions. With pens and rulers, they drew straight lines across the continent. These lines became borders, permanent boundaries between countries. This event is called the Scramble for Africa by historians. The problem with these borders was serious. They divided kingdoms that had existed for centuries. They separated families and communities. They split ethnic groups who spoke the same language. They ignored natural boundaries like rivers and mountains that Africans had always respected. By 1914, just 30 years later, almost the entire African continent was under colonial rule. Only two countries remained independent: Ethiopia and Liberia. What did colonization mean for Africa? For the next 50 to 70 years, European countries controlled African lands. They extracted valuable resources: gold from Ghana and South Africa, diamonds from Congo and Sierra Leone, rubber from Congo, cocoa from Ghana and Ivory Coast, wool from Nigeria, copper from Zambia. African people worked in mines, on farms, and in industries. But the wealth generated went overseas to build European cities and industries. The economic impact was severe, but even more painful was the psychological impact. Colonial education systems taught many Africans to see their own cultures as inferior. African languages were discouraged in schools. Children were punished for speaking their mother tongues. African histories were not taught, so young people didn't learn about Timbuktu or the great African kingdoms. African religions and traditions were often called primitive or backwards. Over time, this created a crisis of confidence. Many Africans began to doubt their own worth. But here is what's important to understand. We share this history not to create anger or blame. The young people in Europe today are not responsible for what their great-grandparents did, just as we are not limited by what happened to our great-grandparents. This is about understanding, not resenting. Understanding why a continent so rich in resources faced so much poverty. Understanding why independence became so important. Understanding the challenges our founding fathers faced, so we can appreciate their courage. Because the story doesn't end with colonization. It begins with liberation. By the 1950s, Africans across the continent were tired. Tired of being governed by foreigners. Tired of seeing their resources leave their shores. Tired of being told they were less capable. And so, brave men and women rose up and said, "Enough. It's time for Africa to stand on her own feet." These freedom fighters risked their lives for one dream: independence. Now, let us meet four of the greatest among them. Today, we focus on four men who changed the course of African history. For men from four different countries. For men with four different styles. But one shared dream: a free and united Africa. Let me introduce them to you. First, Kwame Nkrumah of Ghana. Born in a small village with humble beginnings. Became the father of African independence. Ghana was the first sub-Saharan African country to gain freedom. He declared, "Africa must unite or perish." Second, Patrice Lumumba of the Democratic Republic of Congo. Started as a postal worker and became a revolutionary leader. He dared to speak truth to power, even when it cost him everything. At Congo's independence ceremony, he shocked the world by speaking boldly about justice. Third, Julius Nyerere of Tanzania. A humble schoolteacher who built a nation through education. His people lovingly called him Mwalimu, which means teacher. He believed Africa's greatest resource was not gold, but educated minds. And fourth, Nnamdi Azikiwe of Nigeria. The great Zik of Africa. A brilliant journalist who used newspapers and words as weapons of liberation. He became the first president of Nigeria and built universities to educate millions. These are our case studies for today. These are the legends whose shoulders we stand on. Now, let us learn their stories. Not just the victories, but the struggles. Not just the dreams, but the sacrifices. Let us begin with the first hero. Our first hero is Kwame Nkrumah. Born September 21, 1909, in a small village called Nkroful, in what was then called the Gold Coast. Died April 27, 1972, in Romania. Country, Ghana. Nkrumah came from a very humble background. His father was a goldsmith in a small village. But young Kwame loved learning. He attended local schools, then won scholarships to study in America and Britain. He studied at Lincoln University in Pennsylvania, USA. He also studied in London, England. Everywhere he traveled, he saw how free people lived in their own countries. And he asked himself one question over and over: why should my people be ruled by foreigners? When he returned to the Gold Coast, he didn't return quietly. He organized the people. He gave powerful speeches. He formed political parties. He led peaceful protests and strikes. The British colonial government arrested him several times. But even from prison, his message spread like wildfire. The people of Gold Coast rallied behind him. They demanded, "Free Nkrumah. Free our country." Finally, the British realized they could not hold back the tide of change. On March 6, 1957, a historic moment arrived. The British flag slowly came down. The new flag of Ghana, red, gold, green, with a black star in the center, went up into the African sky. Ghana became the first sub-Saharan African country to gain independence. That night, Kwame Nkrumah stood before hundreds of thousands of joyful people. He spoke words that would echo across the entire continent. The independence of Ghana is meaningless unless it is linked with the total liberation of Africa. Think about that. On the greatest night of his life, his own country's freedom, he wasn't thinking only about Ghana. He was thinking about all of Africa. What did Nkrumah achieve? He built hundreds of schools and hospitals across Ghana so that every child could learn and every sick person could get treatment. He constructed the Akasambo Dam on the Volta River, one of the largest dams in Africa, to provide electricity to Ghana's homes and industries. He started factories and industries to create jobs and reduce dependence on imports. He brought together African leaders and started the vision of the Organization of African Unity, which later became the African Union. He wrote books and gave speeches teaching Africans to believe in themselves, to take pride in their culture, and to build their own future. He supported other African countries fighting for independence, sending money, weapons, and encouragement. But Nkrumah also faced serious challenges. Some people disagreed with his policies. Some foreign governments were uncomfortable with his vision of a united, independent Africa. Economic problems grew. In 1966, while Nkrumah was traveling abroad on a peace mission, the military staged a coup and removed him from power. He never returned to Ghana. He lived in exile in Guinea, where President Sékou Touré welcomed him. He died in Romania in 1972 while receiving medical treatment. He died far from the country he liberated. But his dream, his message, his vision, that never died. Today, Nkrumah is honored as a founding father of Pan-Africanism, the belief that all African countries should work together as one family. Ghana celebrates him every year. His face is on Ghana's money. His mausoleum in Accra is visited by thousands. KWAME Nkrumah proved that one person with a vision can change a continent. Our second hero is Patrice Lumumba. Born July 2, 1925, in a village called Onalua in the Belgian Congo. Died January 17, 1961, murdered at just 35 years old. Country, Democratic Republic of Congo. Lumumba's story is one of courage and tragedy. The Belgian Congo was not just colonized. It was one of the most brutally exploited territories in all of Africa. For decades, the Belgian king treated Congo as his personal property. Millions of Congolese people died from forced labor, made to harvest rubber and mine minerals under terrible conditions. Into this suffering, Patrice Lumumba was born. He started as a postal worker, delivering letters and packages. But he was brilliant and educated himself by reading everything he could find. He began writing articles in newspapers about justice and freedom. He organized workers and spoke at gatherings. His speeches had fire and passion that electrified people. By the late 1950s, the independence movement in Congo was growing stronger. Belgium realized it could no longer hold on to Congo. On June 30, 1960, Congo's Independence Day arrived. The King of Belgium attended the ceremony. Belgian officials expected African leaders to give grateful, polite speeches thanking Belgium for civilizing them. But Lumumba had other plans. When it was his turn to speak, Patrice Lumumba walked to the microphone. What he said next shocked the entire world. He spoke truth, raw, unfiltered truth, about what colonization had really meant. The humiliation, the forced labor, the violence, the stolen wealth, the murdered Congolese. He declared that Congo would no longer bow to anyone, that Congo's resources belonged to the Congolese people, that dignity and respect were not gifts from Europe, they were birthrights. The room fell silent. The Belgian officials were furious, but the Congolese people erupted in joy. No African leader had ever spoken like that to a European king before. Lumumba became Congo's first prime minister. What did he achieve in a short time? He declared that Congo's vast mineral wealth, diamonds, copper, cobalt, gold, should benefit Congolese people, not foreign companies. He inspired other African nations with his boldness and clarity. He demonstrated that African leaders did not need to beg or apologize. They could stand tall and demand respect. But his boldness made him powerful enemies. Foreign governments wanted to control Congo's resources. Some Congolese politicians were afraid of his radical vision. Powerful mining companies saw him as a threat to their profits. Only 6 months after independence, political chaos erupted. Lumumba was arrested by rivals. On January 17, 1961, at just 35 years old, Patrice Lumumba was killed. The news devastated Africa and shocked the world. But here's what they could not kill: his courage, his message, his example. Today, Patrice Lumumba is honored across Africa as a martyr for independence. His speeches are still studied. His statue stands in Kinshasa. His name is given to streets and schools across the continent. He lived for only 35 years. He led his country for only 6 months. But his impact will last forever. Lumumba taught us that speaking truth is worth more than living in comfortable lies. Our third hero is Julius Nyerere. Born April 13, 1922, in Butiama, a small village in Tanganyika. Died October 14, 1999, in London. Country, Tanzania. Julius Nyerere was different from most independence leaders. He was not loud or flashy. He did not seek glory or fame. He was quiet, humble, and deeply thoughtful. Before he became a politician, Nyerere was a schoolteacher. And he never stopped seeing himself as a teacher, even when he became president. The British colonizers called him teacher. His own people gave him the beautiful name Mwalimu, which means teacher in Swahili. Nyerere believed that education was the greatest weapon against poverty and oppression. He believed that an educated population could never be enslaved again. He studied at Makerere University in Uganda and later at the University of Edinburgh in Scotland. When he returned home, he didn't just fight for political independence. He fought for mental independence. On December 9, 1961, Tanganyika gained independence from Britain. Soon after, it united with the island of Zanzibar to form Tanzania. Nyerere became the first president of Tanzania. But unlike many leaders, Nyerere did not live in luxury. He lived simply. He wore modest clothes. He refused to build himself a grand palace. He often worked in the fields alongside farmers, planting crops with his own hands. What did Nyerere achieve? He built thousands of schools across Tanzania, even in the most remote villages where no schools had ever existed. He made primary education free and compulsory for all children. He made Swahili the national language, uniting over 120 different ethnic groups in Tanzania. This was brilliant. Instead of using English, the colonial language, he chose an African language that many people already spoke. This created national unity and pride. He promoted Ujamaa, an African philosophy of community and collective work. He encouraged villages to work together, share resources, and help each other. He maintained peace and stability in Tanzania. While many African countries experienced coups and civil wars after independence, Tanzania remained peaceful. He helped other African countries fight for their freedom. Tanzania became a safe haven for freedom fighters from South Africa, Zimbabwe, Mozambique, and other countries still under colonial or racist rule. Perhaps most remarkably, after serving as president for many years, Nyerere voluntarily stepped down from power in 1985. This was almost unheard of in Africa at that time. Many African leaders clung to power for life. But Nyerere believed in democracy and peaceful transition. He showed that true leadership means knowing when to pass the torch to the next generation. Even after leaving office, he remained active, advising other African leaders, working for peace in conflicts across Africa, and continuing to speak about education and unity. When he died in 1999 in London while receiving medical treatment, all of Africa mourned. We had lost a true father, a man who led with wisdom, humility, and love. What can we learn from Nyerere? That power does not require palaces and luxury. True power comes from serving your people. That the greatest investment a nation can make is in education. Educated people build great nations. That unity is stronger than division. When people work together, they can achieve anything. Nyerere once said, "A nation that does not educate its people will remain a nation of followers." Let us never forget those words.